Okay, Dr. Balthazar back with a second Neverending Story video, which covers the sequel and second half of the book it's based on. 9 times out of 10, I'm going to side with an author or original creator of an IP against filmmakers who adapted it into something new, but the first Neverending Story in 1984 was that 10th exception. With Neverending Story 2, the next chapter, I'm back in my preferred lane of saying if you don't want to tell someone else's story, just write your own. Don't do the things you're doing here. If they had done to the author's work in the first movie what they did to it in the sequel, his tantrums would have been well justified. But we'll get to that. My approach to film breakdowns is to consider context, storyline, characters, world building, and themes, which I'm going to cover for both book and film, then close up shop on the Neverending Story franchise. Like, subscribe, all the usual pleas for attention and comment to this platform. For context, we pick up where the first film left off in 1984, with audiences coming out in droves to make the Neverending Story a box office hit, and the author fuming in rage. He sued the filmmakers and associated studios to take back control of the IP, since he felt the movie wasn't loyal to his book. But here's the thing of contracts. If the party you sign a contract with kept their end of the deal without violating any terms of the contract, they haven't done anything wrong. Either you aren't a good negotiator and it's just sour grapes, or you're trying to renegotiate in bad faith using public pressure in the courts. Did these girls put on weight? They look like they put on weight. Enda got a $50,000 cash payout, global promotion for its book, and based on the timing of when it was first translated into English, probable assistance with that as well. The filmmakers weren't legally bound to do more. And with the exception of the final scene of the movie, they did as faithful a job recreating his story as can reasonably be expected. His complaints were petty and superficial, as I discussed in my last video. But legal disputes that go nowhere can still drag on for years, so while Endo is cashing checks and virtue signaling as a martyr for artistic integrity, the actors aged out, the audience aged out, and any momentum from the first movie ground to a halt. When production resumed 6 years later, almost no one returned to the project beyond a producer and an actor in a bit part. The kid who played Bastian Booger, Barrett Oliver, had gone from an 11-year-old to a 17-year-old, Noah Hathaway, who played Atreyu, from 13 to 19 years old, and Tammy Stronach, who played the childlike Empress, from a childlike 12 to a not-too-shabby and perfectly legal 18. So they're out, but that was only a legit problem for Atreyu. Bastian's appearance radically changed in story, and the childlike Empress was never seen or heard from again after she got her name. But the filmmakers didn't appear to have an interest in picking up where the first movie left off anyway. Instead, they seem to approach the project with a philosophy that if we cherry-pick things from the book and recycle as much of the first movie as we can, it will come off as new but familiar and will make back our budget, which they will not. When it comes to the storyline, it's necessary to treat the book and movie as separate entities. There's too much variation to put them together this time around. So let's start with the book. At the 200-page halfway point of the children's novel, Bastian Booger gives a childlike Empress her name, is brought into Fantasia, and gifted with wishes that cost him memories. Atreyu's adventure story ends, and Bastian's character exploration begins. His first wish is to become a handsome devil, and his second all buff and stuff, which dramatically changes his appearance from Bastian Booger to Bastian Badass. He spends more wishes showing off and humiliating others in order to impress everyone, and make himself feel important, and basically becomes drunk with power, harming others and making everyone his servants or slaves. He declares himself God Emperor. A horrid civil war filled with violence, blood, and death in a children's book follows. Then he wanders around aimlessly as the author meditates on various themes. And in the end, he gets to drink the water of life and go home since Atreyu agrees to clean up his mess. So what did the filmmakers do with all that? They started off the story in the real world, with cringe comedy that introduces Bastian Bibbidi, sets up a fear of jumping off waterfalls to hold him back in some way, vaguely references the death of his mom, and sort of introduces a disconnect between him and his dad. Next, we have a recreation of the theft of the Neverending Story book from Carl Conrad Coriander's bookstore that doesn't make sense for it to happen like it did in the first movie. For reasons that are beyond my comprehension, they also changed old Carl's name from 3 C's to 3 K's, which you can't do in my country. The fucking KKK? Are you kidding me? What the fuck is wrong with you people?
I think we all think the bag was a nice idea.
Yeah.
But not pointing any fingers, they could have been done better.
Maybe they were trying to dig into the author a little bit. They made a point to put his name in the opening credits, which is undoubtedly an eat shit moment, directed at him and his legal team, which he funded with money they made for him. But, I mean, who knows? Bastian Bobbidi opens the book and is transported back to Fantasia, where a main antagonist that I thought for sure was the same actress who played the owner of the Cleveland Indians in the movie Major League, but I was mistaken, she did not, is introduced along with a confusing set of motives. The central conflict appears to be the childlike Empress has been imprisoned, so she Princess Leia's Bastian for help. Something called the emptiness is spreading, which is basically the nothing from the first film, without visual effects or any indication that something bad is happening. Bastian has the amulet Orin, which allows him to make wishes come true, so he's the only one with the power to save the day. But the owner of the Cleveland Indians' sister has a MacGuffin that makes him lose a memory whenever he makes a wish. So her hope is that she'll nullify his OP wish-making power and rule Fantasia when everything is filled with the empty, which she can control for reasons. Crab people?
Crab people, crab people.
Yes, crab people. Invade a town, and while he has infinite wishes at his disposal, Bastion Boo chooses not to use his newfound god power for reasons. So one of the villains, Birdman, yes, Birdman, saves him from certain death for more reasons. They try to increase the stakes by introducing the concept that as things go south in Fantasia, books go blank on Earth, which adds further confusion to the central conflict. Falkor and Rockbiter return as cringe comedy and references to the first movie.
Yum, yum, okay.
They couldn't get Alan Oppenheimer to return to do their voices, so they seem to have settled on grabbing whoever was wandering around the recording studio at that time to do their lines.
And I'm glad to see you.
John.
Which is almost as off-putting as a dollar store Indian outfit New Atreyu is decked out in. It's great that they flipped up $5 and some glass beads to one of those junk shops that sell Native American merch, but seriously, what the fuck? Broadly speaking, the costumes and special effects are at best described as cheap and grotesque. That's a dragon in flight. We jump back and forth between Fantasia and the real world to keep Bastion Bibbidi's father involved, but he doesn't do much besides sweat a lot. If they had used some time to set up an angle by which the loss of his wife deeply wounded him, and the subplot to Bastion's adventures was to find a way to make things better for him, that might have been something. But instead they went for comedic beats that fall flat. The movie jumps out to the dad quite a bit. I suspect they were trying to recreate the dynamic in the first movie where it kicks out to Bastion reading the book, complete with window blowing open stage left and all. But it feels a bit like something the first film did, so that's just what you have to do in a never-ending story. Dollar Store Atreyu and Bastion Bobbidi storm the laser beam firing hand-shaped fortress with the most confusing siege weapons in film history. Lame as fuck wind-up toys that explode out of oversized Easter eggs. Bastion possesses god powers with the ability to make any wish come true. But instead of using that power for any productive reason, he does stupid shit like wishing for one step at a time to scale the side of a castle that he could just wish into gravel. Or wishing for a can of spray paint to fight the crab people.
Crab people, crab people.
Yes, crab people. Instead of any weapon imaginable, if he was even in the mood to fight something that he could just wish out of existence. They take the sister of the Cleveland Indians owner hostage for reasons. She makes a nonsensical argument to create a rift between Bastion Boo and Dollar Store Atreyu. They have a bitch fight resulting in Dollar Store Atreyu's death. Falkor flies a corpse back to the town they started off in, and Bastion makes his way back in that same direction with help from the villain's henchman Birdman.
Birdman!
Yes, Birdman. Who decided to flip sides because he saw a memory in which Bastion's dying mom crowbarred in a reference to never-ending story is never-ending, and he inferred that if he doesn't lend a hand, the never-ending story will end, which would be a blessed mercy at this point. This movie is a really long 1 hour and 23 minutes. Bastion Bibbidi wishes Dollar Store Atreyu back to life, although his external jugular is clearly throbbing while he's supposed to be dead, using up one of the 2 remaining memories he has left as wish ammunition. The sister of the Cleveland Indians owner turns up, along with the crab people.
Crab people, crab people.
Yes, fucking crab people. To force the issue with the last wish, and he wishes for her empty to be filled with a nice big hot something. Jesus Christ is fucking... Anyway, she explodes, which saves the day and gives our hero all his memories back. He then gets a bonus wish, and in a massive payoff to the time invested at the start of the film, he finds the courage to jump off a waterfall and returns to the real world where Bastion Bibbidi Bobbidi Boo has a healthy father-son moment with his dad. Roll credits, they couldn't convince the music sensation Lee Mall or his band Kajagoogoo, who made the catchy theme music in the first movie, to return, so they got a guy named Joe Milner to make a craptastic mashup remix of the original tune and some other bullshit. Milner was even less successful in the music industry than a band named Kajagoogoo, which is pretty fucking low in the totem pole there, Playboy. But it is a bit of a catchy tune as far as end credits music goes. I don't hate it. Let no man say I hate everything about this film. For characters in the second half of the book, Enda does away with any believable character development or connections between motives and actions. He also stops trying to do much with a story or hold to any world-building rules. Instead, everything revolves around thematic messages. Bastion completely transforms as a character, but that doesn't mean he stays consistent as that new character. He wrestles with his sense of self to a certain degree, but he mostly just says, does, and thinks whatever is convenient at that particular moment to ruminate on a theme. Every other character is shallow and one-dimensional, highlighted by Atreyu, who shared the deepest connection with Bastion imaginable, who he met once and held hands with while Falkor sang a song. This minor and slightly homoerotic moment,
holding hands with a man makes me terribly uncomfortable.
It is a sign of friendship in many countries.
Well, not in ours.
forged an unbreakable bond of brotherhood, so deep it drove all of Atreyu's actions through the next 200 pages, where he rescued Bastian from total destruction and got him home at great personal cost to himself. When Bastian got home to his father, he found that his absence from the real world for almost a full day jolted his dad out of the apathetic depression his wife's death had left him in, and he realized he still had a son that needed him, and in a symbolic way, Bastian brought the water of life out of Fantasia to his father, who cried a tear of joy and became a new man. So that was something. But the never-ending story is more about motifs than characters. Meanwhile, the movie has no idea how to develop the Bastian character in any direction. They can't or won't follow the book, where he comes off almost like a vague reference to the Nazis, an unpopular, weird, and pitiable nobody that becomes all-powerful and misuses that power in the worst ways imaginable, harming others and feeding his own piggish arrogance. They try a setup and payoff with him starting out afraid of jumping from a great height, and by the end of the story, he has the courage to do so. But why? Was it a limiting factor beyond preventing him from making the swim team? But how will he and Dollar Store Atreyu take part in the synchronized diving event at the Olympics if he's afraid? Yeah, that doesn't make sense. His actions through the film suggest his lack of courage is very compartmentalized to the high dive. So whatever, play soccer instead of the swim team. The dad kind of shifts from a very literal thinker to someone who is willing to accept the impossible, which feels like a recycling of some of Bastian's character arc from the first movie. But the other characters are all functions of plot. When they even have motives to begin with, they don't act on them with any acceptable logic, and with all due respect, the collective acting talents of Kenny Morrison as Atreyu, John Wesley Shipp as Bastian's dad, Clarissa Burt as the evil sorceress Zaid, and the rest of the supporting cast are not good. Although I read somewhere they basically eliminated rehearsals to stay compliant with child labor laws capping hours on set. So yeah, it's not easy to hit a scene in 1 or 2 takes without some kind of preparation. As an aside, Bastian is played by an actor named Jonathan Brandis, who merits a few words. Jonathan Brandis first began to appear in television shows in 1984 at the age of 9. He turned a lot of heads in 1990 with the made-for-TV miniseries Stephen King's It, and at age 16 had some success with the films Ladybugs and Sidekicks. But it was the following year in 1993 that he really exploded onto the scene with a dumpster fire that was the show seaQuest DSV. And by exploded onto the scene, I mean the Tiger Beat, Teen Beat, Bop scene, which were trashy magazines geared to teenage girls that pushed teen idols. Brandis, the 2 Coreys, the New Kids on the Block, Jonathan Taylor Thomas, all these pricks the teenage girls I went to high school with went batshit crazy over. And therein lies part of the problem. A teen heartthrob the girls obsess over is naturally repugnant to guys. And girls tend to decide overnight that they're suddenly very mature for their age and drop all interest in teen idols to fixate on upperclassmen or 25-year-olds. The next generation of teenage girls then obsess over newer, younger teen heartthrobs. So just like that, you're 18 going on 80 in the eyes of the demographic that used to write you thousands of letters each week and now look at you like some kind of creep. The adoration from those fickle fans suddenly evaporated. Brandis' career crashed. He hoped a bit part in the movie Hearts of War would revive it, but his scenes were mostly cut from the final version. He hoped a pilot for a prospective show called 111 Gramercy Park would get picked up, but it wasn't. He took to drinking heavily, which only exacerbates bipolar manic depressive swings, something that also only gets worse as one gets older. And at age 27, he committed suicide. I hated this guy because, as a teenager, I saw someone my age that was rich, famous, talented, and attractive to women. Things I wasn't or didn't see myself as at the time. It didn't occur to me that I was, and still am, enjoying a good life, while he was suffering to the point that he couldn't go on anymore. Mental health is a subject that defies simple platitudes, and this isn't the time or place to discuss such things anyway. But if you aren't okay, please be open to the idea of getting help. Please be open to the idea that tomorrow can be different than today, better than today. And if you have a friend or even just a casual acquaintance that seems to be struggling, please say something to them. There are no correct words any more than when someone loses a loved one, just a sincere attempt to show caring through an awkward effort that feels all wrong. Whether or not there's such a thing as a butterfly effect by which the smallest decisions can have transformative effects, I don't know. But after someone you know takes their own life, it's a difficult thing to be left wondering, could I have seen this coming had I been more attentive? Could I have said or done something that would have prevented this from happening had I been more willing to try? I hope you never have to learn what I mean firsthand. And while Jonathan Brandis isn't the ghost of a memory I see in my dreams from time to time, I wish he was still here. Okay, now that I got that off my chest, let's shift gears back to the lesson at hand. For world building, the book creates rules early on that are ignored whenever it's inconvenient for them to exist, or introduces rules far too late in a story to really accept. Contrivance, machine. Bastian gets to wish for anything he wants, but if the author wants him to wish for something he would never wish for, wishes suddenly become subconscious instead of directly stated. If anyone makes a play to become God Emperor, they get condemned to the city of former emperors with their brains removed, which Bastian 100% does, but the hammer doesn't drop on him for reasons. We learn that no one gets to meet the childlike empress more than once in their life around page 300. We learn Bastion can only get home by drinking the water of life around page 375. We learn he can't drink the water of life until all the stories of Fantasia are finished, whatever the fuck that means, around page 395. Whenever the author doesn't feel like explaining something, he just says, "But that's another story, and shall be told another time." So maybe those are the stories he's supposed to finish. Atreyu agrees to finish them on his behalf, but it was established without ambiguity that Fantasians don't have the ability to create stories, so he cannot finish those or any other stories. Only now he can, for reasons. There are no rules here. It's a world Enda spends more time describing the colors of than figuring out the rules for. In the movie, the problems that exist with world building revolve around the lead having a power set that allows him to make any wish come true without defined limitations. The Empress is imprisoned. Okay, wish for her to be free. The villain has magical powers that are a threat. Okay, wish for them to have no powers. There isn't a situation that can't be solved with a wish if the wishes have no restraints placed on them. So if the story isn't Bastion becoming drunk with power as something of a tragic figure by misusing god powers, you can't give him those powers without the audience wondering why he doesn't use them in a way that makes sense. Another world-building issue is the relationship between the real world and Fantasia. In the first movie, they kept it simple. People imagine things, and those things become real in the imaginary world. The sequel inverts that into things that happen in Fantasia become the stories that fill books, but the empty makes them not do that, and if everything becomes filled with the empty, all the books in the real world will become blank, which will suck because everyone spends so much time reading instead of playing Streets of Rage 2 on the Sega Genesis in 1991. Yeah, buddy. One more time. There it is. None of this makes sense, and they ended up wandering off and tried to re-explain it in like 5 different scenes without much success. When it comes to world building in fantasy settings, if you can't make it simple, you can't make it work. When it comes to themes, I was critical of the author in my last video, saying his themes are poorly considered. I'll better qualify that now that we've come to the end of his never-ending story. I like his themes, but if a storyteller can't figure out a way to incorporate the storyline, characters, and world building into their development, that is an example of poor consideration, although they are quite good. Power corrupts. Things you think will bring happiness like strength, reputation, and wisdom probably won't. Complete agreement between individuals creates tranquility, but conformity makes the world passionless and bland. A mother's love for their child is special, but you have to leave the nest eventually. People would like their lives to be different, but don't want to change themselves. All you need is love, for yourself and for others, especially your family. Those are all wonderful themes, and messages that I agree with, but it's the way they're gotten at in the narrative that doesn't work for me. But let's be charitable with the last word on the book. If you ignore the first half and take the chapters of the second half as their own kind of short stories for children, they're descriptive enough to be easy to imagine and have a decent moral to the story, which is probably all a small child needs. So Enda delivers to his intended audience regardless of what I think about his work. In the movie, the main thematic concept is a repackaging of the nothing from the first film, only this time around it's called the emptiness, and it doesn't make things disappear, they just become vaguely hollow and soulless. The idea is that empty things are easy to control, referencing a person with an empty mind who allows others to think for them. But then they flip that into an empty heart, with the thematic message that emptiness must be filled with love, which they tried to bring full circle at the end of the film with the disconnect between Bastion and his father resolving into a tender moment between father and son. The general framework of an idea was there, but I don't think the film delivered on it since the lame comedy beats at the start of the movie defined the father-son relationship more than anything they tried to introduce later on. As if the other categories, whatever they were trying for with themes, just didn't come together. In 1984, Enda called the movie adaptation of his never-ending story a gigantic melodrama of kitsch, commerce, plush, and plastic. While I think that claim is absurd in reference to the first movie, it fits with the never-ending sequel. In conclusion, The Never-Ending Story 2, the next chapter, takes a semi-sensical, though thematically pleasing, second half of a book bearing little resemblance to its first half, and cherry-picks characters and ideas and make an absolute mess. When you stand the first Never-Ending Story movie off against the book, the movie is a profoundly more enjoyable experience. When you stand the sequel off against the book, the opposite is true. Some movies are so bad they fall into the Mystery Science Theater 3000 category of fun to watch for their absurdity, but between the look and feel of the costumes and sets being so grotesque, and a young Jonathan Brandis with seemingly his whole life in front of him being the lead, the movie just leaves a vague feeling of discomfort and regret that's hard to get around. I've seen rumors of a Never-Ending Story reboot that plans on keeping to the source material as closely as possible, to which I say good luck with that, but who knows if it will see the light of day. We shall see. Anyway, for those that take an interest in sequels that outdo the original films, my prescription is Star Trek II, The Wrath of Khan, Aliens, and Mad Max 2, The Road Warrior. That's my thought for the day. I'm Dr. Balthazar. Like what you like, don't what you don't. It's all your call, Kemosabe. Take it easy, everyone.